Evening and thank you very much. I hope I am loud and clear and my presentation is seen by all of you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So Helix valgus, I want to make it very simple for you people because it's a very complex topic and still it is an unsolved mystery in the foot and ankle orthopedics. So uh, approaching Helix valgus is a rule of four things. You document the deformity, you learn about certain pre-existing primary causes, get answer of the four question and follow a simple algorithm. So how do you document the deformity? Do the clinical examination, look at the mobility, stability and presence of arthritis on clinical evaluation. Most important clinical evaluation is evaluating the hypermobility of the first tarso-metatarsal joint. Look at this test where holding other part of the foot with one hand, I'm trying to rock first metatarsal and tarso-metatarsal joint up and down and comparing this with the opposite side. If the hypermobility of tarso-metatarsal joint is there, then you're going to go with some different procedure. The another test for that is called a strap test. When you really strap this metatarsals, the deformity gets corrected. That is another test. And even when you take the x-ray, in x-ray also the deformity gets corrected. That means there is hypermobility at tarso-metatarsal joint. And look for the arthritis in the clinical evaluation. And on the evaluation of the x-ray, you look whether the joint is congruous or not. The congruous joints is where the joint surfaces, articular surfaces are matching with each other. The incongruent joint is where the articular surfaces are not matching with each other. Then certain primary causes could be adult acquired flat foot deformity, which we are going to discuss in the next talk. Heel valgus, again because of the flat foot. And some pressure effects in form of pons and callosity is what also you are obliged to see. And some anatomical abnormalities like laterally oriented articular surface, metatarsus adductus, splaying of the foot, metatarsus primus varus. Now, you are going to answer four questions. Is there arthritis of metatarsophalangeal joint? If the arthritis of the metatarsophalangeal joint is there, then your uh, uh, algorithm would be different. Is there hypermobility of the first ray or first tarso-metatarsal joint? Third question is metatarsophalangeal joint congruent? And the fourth question, what is the severity of deformity? So let's take all these questions to take you to the management algorithm. Weight bearing radiology is very important. You measure hallux interphalangeus angle. You measure distal metatarsal articular angle, that is the angle into which metatarsal articular surface is angulated with the shaft of the metatarsal. You measure in a weight bearing radiology intermetatarsal angle. This is where you measure hallux. This is hallux valgus angle and this is the intermetatarsal angle. So these are the four important angles which you measure in weight bearing x-ray. And look at the morphology of your metatarsophalangeal joint. How is the joint and how is the articulation? Now there comes the algorithm. If there is first metatarsophalangeal joint arthritis, very simple, you have to do arthrodesis of first metatarsophalangeal joint. This is done mainly into 15° of valgus, 10 to 15° of dorsiflexion, either with the plate, screws or plate and screws. And this is what is the first question you're going to ask. Is there first metatarsophalangeal arthritis? Then you're going to do fusion. Like this case, a fusion was done. Like this case, fusion was done with the two cross screws. The second question you are going to answer with your clinical examination and radiology is there hypermobility of the first tarsometatarsal joint? If there is hypermobility of first tarsometatarsal joint, that means any of your correction distally is not going to stay. You need to do fusion of first tarsometatarsal joint, which is called as Lapidus fusion. So for a hypermobile first ray or first tarsometatarsal joint, like this, you have to do a tarsometatarsal fusion, like I have done in this case with 2 cross screws, and the deformity gets corrected like this. Again, a case of hypermobile first tarsometatarsal joint, you do what is called as Lapidus fusion or first tarsometatarsal joint fusion with the cross screw and plate. The third question you ask is the joint congruent? If the joint is congruent, that means you are able to get out with simpler procedures like soft tissue release and osteotomy of a lesser magnitude. If the joint is incongruent, then you are going to need complex procedure, combined procedures, a shaft osteotomy or a proximal osteotomy in that form. Now comes conservative care. Conservative care, you suggest patient to avoid narrow toe box shoe, avoid high heels. You might give orthosis for a pes planus. You need extra depth shoe, you need custom shoe, you need shoe inserts. Mild hallux valgus, when is a deformity defined as a mild hallux valgus? When you have hallux valgus angle less than 30, intermetatarsal angle less than 13, it is called mild hallux valgus deformity. You do distal soft tissue release and a distal osteotomy like a chevron osteotomy. If there is a moderate hallux valgus deformity, like if it is angle of hallux valgus is less than 40 and intermetatarsal angle is more than 13, you do proximal procedures or a shaft osteotomy in form of what we call as a scarf osteotomy. And for a severe hallux valgus deformity where hallux valgus angle is more than 40, intermetatarsal angle is more than 20, you need to do shaft osteotomy or a basal proximal osteotomy or a fusion procedure. Surgery is always offered for symptomatic hallux valgus, not for the cosmetic reasons. At surgery, your clinical goals are to correct hallux valgus per se, correct pronation of the toe, reduce the medial eminence of the hallux valgus, narrow the foot to correct metatarsus adduct primus varus. And your radiological goals are to correct hallux valgus angle, to re-establish metatarsal head to sesamoid relationship, to re-establish congruity of metatarsophalangeal joint, and to correct intermetatarsal angle. So, to quickly summarize, on a clinical examination, you need to find out the type of deformity, the primary factors which are affecting this case, and on radiological evaluation, you find out the hallux valgus angle and intermetatarsal angle. And thereafter, for a mild deformity, you go for soft tissue release and a distal chevron osteotomy, which is osteotomy very nearer to the head of the metatarsal. For a moderate deformity, you can go ahead and do a shaft osteotomy, which is called chevron osteotomy, which is called scarf osteotomy. And for a severe deformity, you will be doing fusion of the first tarsometatarsal joint, or you can do your extended scarf osteotomy, or you can do a proximal basal metatarsal osteotomy. So there are so many options for osteotomy. More than 150 osteotomies are described. What osteotomy you are going to select? 5 basic strategy. Soft tissue procedure, almost always you have to do that. So in soft tissue release, you have to do lateral release, medial exosectomy and medial plication. First MTP fusion, if there is arthritis of the first MTP. Distal osteotomy for mild deformity. For moderate or severe deformity, shaft osteotomy. For severe deformity, basal osteotomy or a first tarso-metatarsal fusion. And for hyperlaxity of first TMT joint, first TMT fusion. Now, what do you do when you do distal soft tissue procedure? In a lateral release, you release adductor hallucis tendon, you release lateral capsule, you release metatarso-sesamoid ligament, and you release transverse metatarsal ligament. On a medial side, you excise the medial eminence and plicate the medial capsule. So this is what diagrammatically you do in the distal release and in the medial capsular plication. So you release the capsule, you release the adductor, you release the transverse metatarsal ligament for a lateral release. How do you do chevron osteotomy? In a chevron osteotomy, you are giving a medial incision, removing a silver of the medial eminence to reduce the medial eminence, and then you're marking the osteotomy up at a point which is 5 millimeter from the head of the metatarsal right into the center, and marking two limbs of this osteotomy which are making 60-degree angle with each other. And then once you do this osteotomy, you displace the head fragment laterally and the shaft fragment medially and fix it with 1 or 2 screws. So, and then plicate your medial capsule. So these are the operative pictures of a chevron osteotomy, a medial approach, and then exposure of the capsule. I am putting excision of the medial eminence. I am putting a K-wire as a guide. I mean, this is the medial eminence excision, K-wire as a guide thereafter, and then you are marking the osteotomy. This is marked at 60-degree, and then you've done the osteotomy, you've shifted the head fragment laterally, fix it with the screw, and got the correction. This was a case of chevron osteotomy. This was the correction at the end of 5 years, a lateral release, a medial plication, and a chevron osteotomy. This is how this X-ray at the end of 5 years look. The screw is there, osteotomy is united, medial eminence was removed. This is the lateral view of the same patient. Another case, chevron osteotomy fixed with the 2 screws, 5 years follow-up. The next very commonly done osteotomy world over is a scarf osteotomy. It is a Z-shaped osteotomy where metatarsal head is translated laterally. There is no shortening. It's a very stable osteotomy, and it has got a broad surface area to cover. So it's a Z-shaped osteotomy. So you put in a cut which is transverse into the shaft of the metatarsal, and the another cut you're putting 2 to 3 mm below the dorsal surface of the metatarsal here, and 2 to 3 mm above the plantar surface of the metatarsal proximally. And you are right in between the vascular tree. So this is the way diagrammatically it looks. You shift the fragment, head fragment laterally and fix with the 2 screws. This is what you do. The proximal fragment is pulled out, distal fragment is pulled in laterally, and then it makes, and you put in screws at the 1/3 to 2/3 junction of this osteotomy. And look at this, the osteotomy is angled from medial side towards the 5th metatarsal so that it has this kind of a slant. And then the dorsomedial protruding fragment, proximal fragment is cut. So this is the case where a scarf osteotomy was done. The incision was marked. I like to position patient over a distal, over the tibia nail assembly like this with the foot flat. Medial eminence was excised medially, and then 2 K-wires are put to serve as a reference point for a transverse limb of the scarf osteotomy. Osteotomy is done with the mini bar and pen, and then you are translating the fragment. You're pulling the proximal fragment medially, pushing the distal fragment laterally. So sifting has been done. This is the X-ray picture of that sift. You can see that head fragment has been sifted in or laterally. The shaft fragment has been sifted medially, and the whole articular surface has got corrected. You fix it temporarily with the K-wire, replace K-wire with the screws, and the overhang portion of this is cut, and this is how the X-ray picture looks like. So the hallux valgus has become corrected, and look at this, look at the congruity of the joint and the shifting of the osteotomy and fixation with the two screws. That is the scarp osteotomy, most commonly done in the world, and that is the lateral image. This is the 6 years follow-up of the scarp osteotomy with corrected hallux valgus. Sometimes you need to use proximal osteotomy. It could be proximal crescentic osteotomy, proximal wedge osteotomy, or a proximal chevron osteotomy. These are used for the cases which has got a very severe hallux valgus deformity. You also need to add what we call it as an Akin's osteotomy. It is a medial close wedge osteotomy done at the base of the proximal phalanx, fixed with the staple or a screw or a K-wire. This is when you have a severe deformity. After doing scarf osteotomy also, you feel that there is some undercorrection, there is some rotation of the phalanx. It is at that time that you do this Akin's osteotomy and you correct the angle. So this patient of Dr. T.H. Lee, my mentor, this is the Akin's osteotomy, medial open wedge osteotomy, which will be closed. It could also be closed and fixed with a staple. Minimally invasive surgery is also being done for hallux valgus, but I think it is beyond the scope of this presentation as well as your purview. You should know that there is a minimally invasive surgery available. So to summarize, that hallux valgus deformity has got multiple surgical options. You need to learn whether the deformity is mild, deformity is moderate, deformity is severe, and accordingly you have to do your procedure. Most often than not, you would be doing a lateral release, medial plication, and osteotomy. Osteotomy would be Chevron's osteotomy when you have a mild deformity, scarf osteotomy for moderate to severe deformity. For arthritis, you would need arthrodesis of proximal or distal joint. That's all. Thank you. I wanted to make it very short and sweet for you because this is a little trickier topic even for the orthopedic surgeons. So, any question, any comment?
Yes, anybody wants to ask any question regarding hallux valgus, please proceed.
Yeah, I think everything has gone in or everything has gone above the
No,
head.
no, everything has gone in. You made it very clear.
Everything is gone in, sir.
In, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Very simple.
We go to a little.
Tell them post-op protocol what they should also write a little bit of post-op protocol.
Yeah, for a post-op
Just for
protocol for
completion.
hallux valgus.
After your surgery.
Yeah, after surgery, the most important thing is the way you put your dressings. Your dressings are put in such a manner that you want to keep your metatarsal heads compressed. So that is how you're putting a strapping in such a form that you want to compress the foot at the level of metatarsal heads. And you are always putting a spacer between a great toe and the second toe. So a spacer between first and second toe would be by a bunch of gauze piece You want to keep it corrected and you want to put in a gauze piece between first toe and the second toe, big toe and the second toe. When you change the dressing, patients are not allowed to bear weight. And when you change the dressing again, you make sure that you reapply this kind of strapping and a gauze piece between great and second toe, first and second toe, big and second toe. At the 10th or 12th day, we usually remove the stitches, and patients looking as per the type of the swelling, post-op swelling, most of the patients are allowed to ambulate and walk with the heel weight bearing at the end of 2 weeks. So 2 weeks, most of the patients starts walking, putting the heel on the ground. And next 2 weeks, so that is 4 weeks post-operatively, you take the X-ray, EP, oblique, and lateral of the foot to make sure that what is the status of the osteotomy. Normally, these osteotomies have got good contact, so they heal very fast. You are also compressing it with the screws. So by 4 weeks, you may ask your patient to start partial weight bearing. And in next 2 to 3 weeks, as per the healing of the osteotomy, a progressive increase into the weight bearing is done. The last X-ray may be taken at the end of 2 months, and patients are by that time walking and doing majority of the routine activities. These patients are likely to have long-lasting venous edema for 3 to 6 months, which is almost always informed to the patient. So that is the postoperative protocol. A scarf osteotomy, which is an osteotomy with a long articulating surface, heals more quicker than other osteotomies. So therein, you could allow weight bearing little earlier also. Anything else into hallux valgus?
Yes, any other doubt? Okay, you can proceed with the second lecture, sir. You can
Yeah.
proceed.
So you are able to see my screen.
Yes, sir. And your audio is also clear.
Yeah.
You can proceed,
So we are going to discuss adult acquired flat foot, which is mainly because of the insufficiency of tibialis posterior tendon. There are other varieties of flat foot because of the Charcot. Patient could develop a flat foot because of some malunited fracture. Patient could have secondary flat foot. But what we are going to discuss is one of the most common variety of the flat foot, that is adult acquired flat foot or a tibialis posterior insufficiency giving rise to flat foot. And there are 4 stages of this flat foot. And the whole approach and the management of the flat foot is about defining the stage of the flat foot. So stage 1 of the flat foot is where you have tendinopathy of the tibialis tendon, posterior tendon. Otherwise, tendon is not elongated, nor tendon has ruptured, and there is no deformity. So this is the stage 1. The picture demonstrated here is the stage 1 flat foot picture. The stage 2 of the flat foot is where your tibialis posterior tendon is lengthened because of the constant pressure, and patient has developed a deformity which is flexible in variety. What do you mean by a flexible deformity? When patient lifts the foot, arch would get restored. When patient puts the foot on the floor, the arch gets distorted. So that is the stage 2 of the flat foot. And in the stage 3, the tendon is always lengthened, probably tendon is ruptured, the deformity has gone into a fixed deformity. Even patient is not bearing weight, then also deformity is there. Patient is bearing weight, then also deformity is there. And stage 4 is again fixed deformity with involvement of the ankle joint. So in stage 4, your ankle also get tilted into valgus. So a fixed deformity added with the ankle involvement. There was stage 2, which was subdivided into 2A and stage 2B. In stage 2A, you have purely medial complaints because the pain and problem is lying on the medial side. Tibialis posterior is inflamed. In stage 2B, patient starts to have lateral symptoms because the foot of the patient goes into valgus and tendon of peroneal and calcaneofibular ligament gets impinged between the tip of the fibula and the lateral border of the calcaneus. So patient starts with the lateral symptoms. Stage 4 could have a flexible ankle valgus in a stage 4A and a rigid ankle valgus in a stage 4B. Now, there are very, very important clinical tests. If you have attended my clinical examination webinar, a single heel raise test is going to tell us about the integrity of tibialis posterior tendon. A too many toes sign test. When you look from the behind, if you see more than 1.5 toes, that means the heel has gone into valgus. So it is stage 2B flat foot. Heel looks like into valgus. You also need to evaluate tibialis posterior function, and I also showed on that day how to evaluate tibialis posterior function clinically. In a radio diagnosis, you almost always want to get weight-bearing X-rays. Look at this. This patient's X-ray on the left side of was documented as a normal X-ray. The same patient, when stood and we took the standing X-ray, the whole arch collapsed and patient was diagnosed to have a flat foot. So every X-ray where you want to diagnose flat foot has to be weight-bearing. In a weight-bearing X-ray, what you look is called a line, Mary's line. So a line passing from the center of the first metatarsal passes through the center of the talus. So it doesn't make any angle. This angle is 0. But when patient has got flat foot, the line breaks and it forms an angle. That angle is called Mary's angle. This line is called as Mary's line. In an AP view, again, it has to be weight bearing. Look at this. This normal looking foot, when patient stands, the whole talus goes into varus and foot goes into valgus. So forefoot gets abducted with your talar head uncoverage increased. So what you look into the AP standing view for in a case of flat foot is talonavicular uncoverage and thereby abduction of the forefoot. If you see the axis of this foot versus the axis of the hind foot, it is forming an angle outside that is called forefoot abduction. Again, if this talonavicular head uncoverage is less than 30% of the talar head, it is stage 2A, but in stage 2B, the talar head uncoverage is more than 30%. This is the radiological parameter. In a stage 3, you would have arthritis of subtalar, talonavicular, calcaneocuboid joint, forefoot abduction, and heel into valgus. So stage 1, you don't have any deformity. Stage 2, you have flexible deformity. Stage 3, you have arthritis of the joint with the fixed deformity. In stage 4, you have a talus which is gone into valgus into the ankle motiles. That is how you essentially diagnose it. In the stage 1, essential treatment is conservative. You want to prevent rupture of the tendon by giving rest to the tendon. And giving rest to the tendon is the aim in stage 1. In stage 2, you also try with the conservative care for at least 6 months. And your whole aim is to prevent progression of deformity by conservative management. In stage 3 and 4, mostly surgery is required. You try conservative care for the patients who have got comorbid condition and those who are unfit for the surgery. then and then only you try conservative modalities, and these modalities are in form of accommodation of the deformity. You need not correct this deformity. If you try to correct this deformity with the medial arch support and orthotics and footwear modification, patient would have increased into the pain, because a fixed deformity cannot be corrected by your orthotics. You need to accommodate this deformity in your footwear. So what do you try in the conservative care? You can give NSAIDs to patient. Sometimes this patient have got systemic rheumatoid arthritis or seronegative arthropathy. You manage systemic diseases with the medications. You do ask patient to go for physiotherapy in form of strengthening of muscles of the foot and ankle, use of TheraBand for that. Iontophoresis, cryotherapy, laser, ultrasound, all are the modalities which can be tried. Ask your patient to modify the activity, reduce the weight bearing time, and orthotics in form of medial wedge in the footwear or a medial column post in the footwear. If there is heel valgus, then you need to put in a heel alteration by a heel medial heel wedge. Sometimes you give a foot mold, sometimes you go give below knee plaster or a boot or University of California orthotics. So this is TheraBand, and you're trying to strengthen your muscles with TheraBand. And these are the various customized orthotics which are being used for flat foot. You also take the mold of the foot and prepare such a customized footwear. This is the customized mold which is correcting the arch of this patient. Sometimes if the deformity is more, the flat foot is of a longer duration and a stage is higher, you might need to use this kind of brace, which are ankle foot orthotics. So for stage 1, essentially your treatment is conservative. You give physiotherapy, you modify activity, ask patient to reduce weight, send him for physiotherapy, NSAIDs, and you try to correct your problems of your patient. But it is the stage 2 where you require conservative care for 6 months, failing which you go for the operative management. In stage 2, your surgical management would be joint sparing procedures. Whatever you do, you don't go for the arthrodesis or the fusion of the joint. But in stage 3 and 4, your surgery is in form of joint sacrificing procedure where you are going to go with arthrodesis. Sometimes in stage 1, where patient has got gout or rheumatoid arthritis, and if patient is not responding to conservative management, this tenosynovitis of tibialis posterior can be excised with a tenosynovectomy procedure. Look at this case example where a florid tenosynovitis of tibialis posterior was debrided and tenosynovectomy was done. Now stage 2 of the flat foot, what are the surgical procedures we are doing? These surgical procedures could be tenodesis of tibialis posterior tendon with flexor digitorum longus. Flexor digitorum longus is a tendon which is in face tendon with tibialis posterior tendon. Flexor digitorum longus tendon has got a course which is just by the side of tibialis posterior. Remember Tom, Dick and Harry, right? So thirdly, flexor digitorum longus has got interconnections with flexor hallucis longus distal to the master knot of Henry. So if you sacrifice flexor digitorum longus, still there would be flexion of the toes aided by, helped by the flexor hallucis longus. So for tibialis posterior tendon problems, we always use flexor digitorum longus tendon. So herein, this is the tibialis posterior tendon, and this tendon is side to side tenodized with the flexor digitorum longus. So weak tibialis posterior here would be supported by flexor digitorum longus, and both of them would now act together. So this is a procedure which is done in a very early stage of non-responding stage to flat foot. Now look at this another case where I have done tenodesis of flexor digitum longus with tibialis posterior with these 3-6 sutures. The most commonly performed procedure is transfer of flexor digitum longus for tibialis posterior. And look at this figure where flexor digitum longus is passed through the tunnel into navicular and is sutured back over itself. So this tendon then acts as tibialis posterior tendon to maintain the integrity of the arch. So ruptured or non-viable, non-salvageable tibialis posterior tendon, you do FDL transfer. It is always done as combined procedure with a medial calcaneal slide osteotomy. I am going to come to that in next few slides. So why choose FDL for transfer? It is directly adjacent with the same line of the pull. It matches the strength of peroneus brevis, which is on the opposite side. So it is matching the strength of peroneus brevis. Both the muscles, flexor digitum longus, FDL and tibialis posterior are in phase muscles. And you can sacrifice FDL because FHL can take work of FDL. Look at this case, a very badly ruptured, degenerated tibialis posterior tendon. And then this was the tibialis posterior tendon. This is the harvested flexor digitum longus, which was harvested by cutting it at the level of master note of Henry. And then flexor digitum longus is transferred to the navicular to work for tibialis posterior. The another procedure which is carried out almost always is tendo-Achilles release. All flat foot cases beyond stage 1 would have contracture of the tendo-Achilles, and you need to release the tendo-Achilles contracture for curing this patient. And you do this Silverskoid test and decide whether gastrocnemius is tight or tendo-Achilles is tight. And accordingly, if the gastrocnemius is tight, you do gastrocnemius recession. You put in your incision at the musculotendinous junction of the calf, open the aponeurosis of gastrocnemius and cut the aponeurosis of gastrocnemius like it is shown here. And this is going to increase the dorsiflexion and release the contracture of tendo-Achilles. The another method, when you have contracture of the tendo-Achilles, then you do percutaneous triple incision hemiresection of tendo-Achilles. So with the percutaneous 3 incisions which are placed about 1.5 centimeters away from each other, you cut the half of the tendo-Achilles on with every incision and then stretch it so that it would lengthen. So this is the case where you have a tight tendo-Achilles. I'm trying to dorsiflex the ankle. It is not allowing me to do. This is the kind of incisions I have put in. And then once I put in the incision, I will forcibly dorsiflex this foot and ankle, and I'm going to get a dorsiflexion range. So this was before, this is after. This gastrocnemius lengthening is always required in every flat foot surgery. Another most commonly done procedure is medial calcaneal sliding osteotomy. So what we do is we scientifically fracture the calcaneus, which we call osteotomy, and we shift this osteotomy medially so that the weight bearing axis is shifted medially. So a valgus is corrected and the pull of the tendo-Achilles is also neutralized. So this is called medial calcaneal slide osteotomy or MCO. So it shifts the mechanical pull of tendo-Achilles medially and thereby it helps flexor digitum longus. It also shifts weight bearing axis of the heel more closer to the long axis of the tibia. How do you do that? An incision is kept like this, and then you're doing your osteotomy, opening this osteotomy, shifting this osteotomy, fixing it with one K-wire, which would be replaced with the screw and another K-wire. So this is the displacement I've done. Another K-wire, and then this K wires are replaced with the screw. The prominent upper portion of the osteotomy is also punched to reduce the prominence, and these are the X-rays of medial calcaneal slide osteotomy. Sometimes if the patient is very obese in a stage 2, or if the patient comes very late with the stage 2 flat foot, lateral column lengthening procedures are done. What do you mean by lateral column lengthening? Your foot has abducted. Your talus head has gone medially. Your navicular together with the forefoot has gone into abduction, and your lateral column has shortened. You want to lengthen your lateral column so that whole forefoot which has gone into abduction would get rotated into neutral position. There are two procedures which are being done. One is Evans osteotomy. Another is calcaneocuboid distraction osteotomy. Now look at this picture. The head of the talus has gone medially and the foot has drifted laterally. So you want to do something here to really rotate this foot from abduction into the adduction. So this is what you do. You do osteotomy through the anterior process of calcaneus and put in a wedge graft. So this forefoot which was into abduction would get rotated into neutral position, and arch would also be restored, and the head of the talus would also be covered by the navicular. So let me show you the case example. Look at this adolescent boy who has got a very bad flat foot. His head of the talus is facing medially and forefoot has gone into abduction. And this is the lateral view of this patient. And this patient underwent Evans osteotomy. This is the incision of medial calcaneal slide osteotomy. This is the incision for Evans osteotomy. I have done osteotomy. I have put in a iliac crest bone graft, a wedge graft, and the foot which was abducted has come into the neutral position. The whole talar head is covered with the navicular. This is the osteotomy graft which has got consolidated. This is the medial calcaneal slide osteotomy which also has got consolidated. When patient is very obese and you really need a powerful correction, then you don't go through the calcaneus, but you go with the distraction at the calcaneocuboid joint by a wedge graft. So you are fusing a calcaneocuboid joint with a wedge graft and fixing it. Again, this is going to rotate abducted foot into the normal position. Look at this young patient who was 120 kg weighing with a bad stage 2 flat foot. This is the incision for medial calcaneal osteotomy. This is the incision for Evans osteotomy. And Evans osteotomy is being distracted with this special instrument which is called Hintermann distractor. And I have put in a graft from the iliac crest and fixed it with the plate. This is the medial calcaneal slide osteotomy fixation. And the calcaneocuboid distraction arthrodesis is done here. The talar head is very well covered by the navicular. Now, what are the surgical procedures we do for stage 3 and stage 4? Stage 3, you have a fixed deformity. Stage 4, you have fixed deformity with ankle involvement. So there are multiple surgeries which are done, but every surgery is in form of arthrodesis. You want to fuse the joint. Either you are doing double arthrodesis, which may be in form of fusing 2 joints or 3 joints, or pantalar arthrodesis, where you fuse ankle and all other joint. Before arthrodesis, one needs to make sure that the vascularity of the foot and ankle is good. Patient has no neuropathy. The skin condition from where we are going to incise is good. What is the amount of deformity? Accordingly, one has to remove the wedge from the joint to correct the deformity, and whether there is tendo-Achilles contracture or not. These all things before arthrodesis is to be looked, and accordingly arthrodesis is to be done. And you must be prepared with your iliac crest grafting. So what are the Chanakya sutras for arthrodesis? One has to correct the flat foot deformity. don't fuse, don't do arthrodesis in situ. You need to align first proximal, then distal. So align your midfoot over hindfoot, align your forefoot over midfoot. You try to salvage as many joints as possible. It was before said that for any problem in foot and ankle, you do triple arthrodesis. Arthrodesis of subtalar joint, talonavicular joint, and calcaneocuboid joint. But now the concept is you try to salvage as many joints as possible, as many joints as possible. And your aim is to get a plantigrade foot, which has got a perfect weight bearing alignment. You're not bearing weight onto any other areas except those for which weight bearing is meant for. Take utmost care of the nerves. If you damage nerves while doing your surgery, there would be neuritic pain and neuroma. And you do distraction with an instrument called lamina spreader or a Hintermann's distractor. Now this patient underwent double arthrodesis. So arthrodesis of calcaneocuboid joint and talonavicular joint, because the arthritis was of these two joint and the deformity of the flat foot was corrected with two joint arthrodesis. You may do double arthrodesis in form of talonavicular and subtalar joint arthritis, like this was done in this case of flat foot. For a triple arthrodesis, you take a lateral incision and a medial incision. Medial incision is between tibialis anterior dorsally and tibialis posterior ventrally, halfway between it. And lateral incision is starting from the tip of the lateral malleolus going to the base of the fourth metatarsal. Again, triple arthrodesis, you must correct equinus first with tendoachilles lengthening. You must center your calcaneus and talus underneath over each other. You must do meticulous preparation of the talonavicular joint. Talonavicular joint is a joint which has a typical shape. So arthrodesis of this joint is little difficult. Fuse all the three subtalar joint, anterior, posterior, and middle subtalar joint. And you can put your fingers between from two incisions to make sure that your navicular is centered over the talus head before you are putting the fusion screws. And sometimes you need, for a calcaneocuboid joint, you need to start your entry little proximal so that you would be able to pass your screws here in the calcaneocuboid joint. And this is called quadruple fusion site, where you have lateral talonavicular joint, you have a subtalar joint here, you have a calcaneocuboid joint here. These joints, wherever they are, this is the area where you have to put your bone graft so that all these four, they unite very well. Let me show you the example of triple arthrodesis. Look at this flat foot. Look at the way there is arthritis of the joints. The whole talus is pointing plantarwards. And this was corrected with talonavicular, calcaneocuboid, and subtalar fusion. Look at this flat foot, very bad flat foot, almost zero, almost arthritic, very much arthritic. And then it was corrected. The arch was restored. Calcaneocuboid joint was fused with the plate, talonavicular joint with the screws, subtalar joint with the screws. And the whole forefoot abduction is corrected with this fixation. And the patient's foot looks good. Another case, look at this, a very bad deformed patient. And then this was corrected with triple arthrodesis. Again, that's the subtalar arthrodesis. The foot is well centered, talar head is well covered by the navicular. In stage 4, you need to do tibio-talo fusion. In the foreign countries, they have availability of total ankle replacement. So in stage 4, they do total ankle replacement here and they do subtalar joint fusion. But for us in India, for stage 4, we do fusion, that is pan-talar fusion, tibia to calcaneus, calcaneus to talus, talus to navicular, and calcaneocuboid joint. Before I finish, I would quickly run through few slides onto pediatric flat foot and accessory navicular. So pediatric flat foot management, There are two basic types of flexible and rigid. A flexible is when patient lifts the foot, the arch restores. Flexible flat foot in pediatric age group is a treatment of parents than the patient. You don't need to do anything. It is to be supervised. It is supervised neglect for that. So you need to treat the parents more than the child. But the rigid flat foot, you need to diagnose them early and treat them early. The causes could be congenital vertical talus, tarsal coalition, peroneal spastic flat foot, some neuromuscular abnormality, and collagen disorders. Flexible flat foot, if it is asymptomatic, no treatment, treatment of parents. Watch for the obesity, watch for the hyperlane, no arch support for flexible. Flexible symptomatic flat foot, you give trial, okay. But I'm giving you the example of a flexible symptomatic flat foot in a child which went on deteriorating. And these are the cases which might require surgery. And this was a deteriorating pediatric flat foot which required surgical correction. Adolescent age group, if you have a rigid flat foot like this, can you see this? It is a case of talocalcaneal coalition, congenital fusion of talus and calcaneus, like this. So this case requires a correction in form of medial calcaneal slide osteotomy and excision of the coalition that was done in this case. And excision area was packed with the bone wax. Accessory navicular with flat foot, how do we approach them? Accessory navicular is there in 5 to 10% of the population. It can occur in three forms: a separate ossicle within the posterior tibial tendon, a synchondrosis with the medial pole of navicular, or it has fused with the navicular. Painful accessory navicular is almost always associated with flat foot because of aberrant tibialis posterior insertion or elongation of tibialis posterior. By and large, you manage it conservatively with the arch support, activity modification, and medication. If the conservative management fails for 4 to 6 months, then you need to go in for surgery. You excise the accessory navicular bone, excise the prominent navicular flush to the talus, and reattach the tendon of tibialis posterior to the bone with suture anchor or a bone tunnel sutures. So this is the patient who had accessory navicular without flat foot, just medial symptoms. So what we did, this was the accessory navicular which was excised, and tibialis posterior tendon was reattached with a suture anchor into the navicular bone. Accessory navicular with flat foot with heel valgus, you would require flat foot surgery plus surgery of accessory navicular. So medial approach, this is the accessory navicular. You excise the accessory navicular, tibialis posterior tendon is there. You need to reattach and advance its insertion and do the medial calcaneal slide osteotomy for flat foot with heel valgus like this. In an adult, if accessory navicular with flat foot and heel valgus is there, like in this case, you go for the excision of the bone, look at the tibialis posterior tendon. Here there is a split tear. This is the flexor digitum longus harvested, and flexor digitum, this is the tibialis posterior excise, this is the accessory navicular excise, and then you reattach your tendon of flexor digitum longus to the navicular, and this is the postoperative X-ray. That is a suture anchor through which a FDL tendon was attached into the navicular, and this was the accessory navicular excise, and this was medial calcaneal slide osteotomy. So accessory navicular in children or adult without flat foot, symptomatic care, NSAID, steroids, sometimes local, and immobilization. With flat foot, symptomatic care plus orthotics. If the care is failed, conservative care is failed, then either you go in for excision and plication or the advancement of tibialis posterior tendon, or excision and rerouting of the tibialis posterior tendon, or excision and transfer of FDL, and addition of medial calcaneal slide osteotomy. That is all from my side for flat foot. Yeah.
Yes,
So-
thank you very much, sir. Any doubt regarding both of the topics, you can proceed. Okay, Rajiv sir, so we can
Yes.
end lecture here. You made it very clear with examples of X-ray and clinical photographs. Both
Yes.
lectures were very clear, sir. And thank you very much for your time and efforts.
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Thank you, Pachure sir. Bye-bye
Thanks.
and good night.
Bye. Bye. Thanks for
Yeah.
Rajiv.
Good night.
Great. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Rajiv sir. Thank you, Pachure sir. We are ending meeting. Good night, sir. Good night.